Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with Mystic Gen Mara, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho. And tonight we're doing our Myth and Tarot series, which means we'll be introducing and discussing the history, some myths, some lore, and maybe a little magic about a different creature from the mystic world. And tonight we're talking about the unicorns, and afterwards we'll do a little tarot reading just to see how things are going for our equine friends on the other side. So I want to go over these unique and mystical creatures. So are they really just weird horses? Can they be helpful to you? And what does it mean when you see one? Because each of these are a little bit different. So some of the basics back in the history changed over the years to the point where what we see today really has nothing to do with the original images and discussions of these pretty immaculate creatures. So tonight we're going to go over some of that information, some a little bit more. If you have questions or comments, go ahead and drop those as we go. So the first reference that I've been able to find as I was digging through these guys was around 2000 BC. So this is, 4,000-ish years ago. And this was a soapstone seal, like a stamp, that they would use to stamp like wax symbols to seal letters. The original images and descriptions have a beast that has a head closer to a cow, a lean body for a horse, a singular horn in the center of its forehead that has a slight curve towards the front. Not like what we see today, much larger. So much of the original images and profiles that people theorize have a single horn, they think was two horns perfectly aligned, so it was a perfect profile. Seriously. But why would you have two horns in the center of your head coming out straight? It doesn't make any logical sense. I mean, a unicorn's kind of weird anyway, but why would you have two horns coming right out of the middle of your forehead? They're not above the eyes. They're in between the eyes. Small carvings and terracotta sculptures and toys that were found around the Indus Valley during this 2,000 year ago or 4,000 year ago period, 2000 BC, actually only have this creature having one horn. These are three-dimensional little toys, and there's a couple of images online, but they're all museum based, and I'm not playing copyright law or copyright headache. So they do exist, and all of the original images have a single horn coming out of the center of their forehead. The two-horn theory is what people would say today to disprove that they ever existed or to blame it on some other animal. The concept of the unicorn, though, doesn't really appear in Asia outside of a couple of little blurbs during this 4,000 year ago period. Then they show back up again around 600 AD. There's a window of time where it's not really an image they use a lot, which is strange, but they were a lot more focused on lions, dragons, dralions, things like that. So it wasn't a popular or common thing to see unicorns in that era culture, but they pretty much persisted in the Middle East up through most of Europe, and some places in the South America. I did find a couple of references, nothing of note, but there were references to single-horned horse-like creatures. They didn't call them the unicorn, but I think that's a European word, to be honest with you. Fun fact, and I thought this was really weird as I was rooting through the mythology, because I've associated them with the Pegasus of Greeks. Unicorns have no actual standing in myth within the Greek mythology, which is where we get a lot of our myths in the West, is from Greece. Not these guys. They predate them and were kind of around, but they didn't play a prominent part within the Greek mythos. They're referenced in part of their science and history as actual living creatures that existed only in India, meaning people had seen them and talked about them, and that was only about 3,000 years ago. give or take a century or two. The description is not for a beast that looks good, though. The way the Greeks described unicorns were light and fast, a wild donkey-like creature, which means not as big as some of the other images that were out there in descriptions, but they talk about it having a 30-inch horn. That's almost 3 feet long coming out of its forehead. The horn was colored very specific colors, and they were swirled together coming out from their forehead. The colors in the Greek histories, because they didn't say it was a myth, they said they saw this animal. It was a red, white, and black swirled horn. And the way I look at it is you take, a red section, a black section, and a white section, and you swirl it out from the head, so you get this spiraling red, white, and black. And they described it coming from a light-skinned donkey, is a lot of the references. So it's like this gigantic white horn, 3 feet long, which I don't know how many donkeys you've been around. 3 feet's like half their body length, so I mean this horn is massive for their size. And it had this beautiful horn coming out of the front. And it's referenced, and this is the reason I think that there really was a creature running around at this time that looked like this. They said the Greeks claimed the meat of a unicorn was bitter and unfit for consumption for any human or creature. They wouldn't even feed it to their dogs, is kind of how it was implied. That surprised me just a little bit, just for what it was. But again, leading a lot of precedent belief to the fact that this might have been a real creature at one time. The Persians, during this time period, in what would be called, in the area that's now Iran, have several reliefs and sculptures in their area of the ancient city of Persepolis, and they thought this is where Aristotle may have gotten his images and ideas of unicorns. Unfortunately, what Aristotle was talking about was probably the oryx, which is this guy. It's a two-horned antelope family. The way he described it was, he described this creature, not a unicorn. And so that's where there's been this confusion, is Aristotle, who was a very intelligent person for his day, described that. But what we're used to, or what they were seeing at the time, had nothing to do with that, just so we're clear. Another reference he uses at this time is in India is to the Indian, we won't use that word, we'll call him a donkey. There's another word that goes instead of India, they call it a jack. But again, I don't know what YouTube censorship's doing, and I'm on multiple platforms, but who knows. Which again is a horse-like creature with a gigantic horn sticking out of its forehead. So Aristotle actually references two separate creatures, not one, and everyone wants to jump on the fact that he was talking about the oryx, which is part of the antelope family. He references another one, but no one wants to acknowledge that. Other Greek references could have been for a type of rhino that was alive during that time. I believe it was the black rhino, white rhino, I don't know. I couldn't figure out which rhino they were talking about, but it was a unique one that we don't have today. And they called it the Monosaurus, describing it as a horse body, elephant feet, the coarse tail of a boar, which means it's pretty much naked except for there's a big puff at the end usually, and the head of a stag deer with only a single black horn coming out of the center of its head. That sounds very weird to me. But that's an entirely different creature than what was seen in the earlier references in India, which is different from what the original description was from 2000 BC. With this particular description, with this stag deer head, with the single black horn, their horn was to be 36 inches average in length, meaning it could have been longer than that. That's a really big horn. I mean, the way they describe this thing sounds like a Clydesdale with the horn coming out but leather skin. It's really a weird description. And my only thought when I was reading it is, what kind of nightmares did they see to get the description of that unicorn? Like, that thing sounds terrifying. Can you just imagine a Greek dad coming home, "Hey kids, I brought you a Montosaurus. Don't worry, it won't be too violent. Just don't poke it." Because this one was described having a terrible temper and was destructive when riled up. Like, it would destroy an entire village if it got really ticked off. I mean, these were not small. This one, I believe, would have been taller than the average man, so shoulders 7 foot was not uncommon for this description. Legend has it that the horn of this creature held so much great power and would protect this beast. The stories talk about the animal being chased, it jumping off of a cliff, bouncing off of the horn, and landing on its feet. I mean, what? Where did you get that story? But there were references, and I thought it was just one, so I started looking it up, and it wasn't just one area. There were stories from multiple areas around this time describing that thing that they had seen jump off of cliffs and bounce on its horn. Well, that's a weird creature just in general. But again, they obviously had seen something to get that opinion. So during this time, there was a little bit of new lore that was starting to be incorporated into the legends of the unicorn, or the stories at the time. And this is where we get closer to what we see today for unicorns. And that is, let me grab my drink real quick. Interesting tea. It's a 3-root blend. It's like turmeric, licorice, and rose or something. Very, very warming tea. Anyway, back to the story. Around this time, the concept of the sacred virgin was added to the story. And I can't quite tell if this was a Christian Catholic influence or if this was something that the Greeks stuck in there. The source of this information is kind of blurred. It's during that time period when the Catholic Church was becoming a thing, and the Greeks were starting to adopt some of their beliefs and practices. So this is kind of where things get a little messy as far as to where the lore actually goes. And that is with the Sacred Virgin. The belief was a virginal maiden, and it has to be this, would be used to lure and capture this wild and untamed beast. The maiden would go out into the woods. What person is going to take some innocent young girl, because we're talking like 14, 15 is what a lot of the descriptions were talking about, because a lot of the times you were married by 17 in this culture. But you're sending this 14, 15-year-old kid out into the woods with this beast that would tear down a town to lure it out? What kind of parents did you have, poor little girl? She would go out into the woods and sit where there was a known path of the unicorn, so she was pretty much putting herself in the heart of the lion's den, so to speak. This beast would come by and be soothed by her very presence, and would lay his massive head into her lap and fall asleep. Okay. And this would allow the men that were hiding in the bushes, because the unicorn couldn't tell that there were a bunch of dudes over there that smelled like sweat and testosterone, to come and capture it. Seriously. It was typical at the time. They would tie this was kind of typical, I should say. They would tie the virginal concept, and this is where you get that blurring from Greek into the Catholic origins. They believed that the virgin was a representative of the Mother Mary. That's fine. And they would believe that this all had a Christian allegory tied into it. The unicorn was seen as the divine soul, the soul of Jesus Christ, her son, who wasn't incarnate yet, and his coming to put his head in her lap was basically entering her body to become a human. The Virgin Mother was the vessel allowing the unicorn spirit to become incarnate into an ascended master avatar, son of God, made into flesh. So Jesus was a horse with a horn that magically shrunk and dove into the body of the Virgin Mary. Anything they could do to steal another person's legend is what I'm hearing here. Anyway, in the Catholic view, it was Jesus as the unicorn entering the Virgin Mary to be made human. I wish I could say I made that up, but that actually is part of the historical reference as to why unicorns are in unbelievable amounts of Christian art. This is where it started, and this was about 1,500 years ago, give or take a century. To me, this is where we start getting into this more modern concept of the pure white unicorn, and it's being associated with innocence and virginity. And to me, I have to think, just because of my weird brain, this reminds me of an old cartoon. Not for something kids, it's PG-13-ish. Even watching it today, what do we got going on here? Do not know what is happening in this little world. We might have to delete some things here in a minute. But it was this movie called The Last Unicorn, and I linked it in the description. It's a late 70s, early 80s type movie, like Rankin Bass style animation. It's very old school, and it's kind of cheesy to watch it now. But there's parts of it that are a little bit terrifying, and I watched it when I was really little, and I look back now going, what were my parents thinking? Why'd they let me watch this? But it's this loss of innocence, and the loss of innocence being referenced as losing your magic. And when you lose your magic, you really do lose that innocent aspect of who you are. Some of the actors and actresses that voiced characters in it was Mia Farrow, and I really do like her as an actress. She's kind of played some really weird parts over the years, but it's got her, probably one of my favorite actresses of all time, Angela Lansbury, voices characters in there, and one of the masters of horror himself, Christopher Lee, voices one of the characters in this movie. You'll know when you hear his voice. He has a very distinctive tone, but it's worth watching even now. If you haven't seen it in a few years, watch it again. You're going to find something out a little bit different. You're going to laugh. You're going to scratch your head going, why'd they let me watch this? It's still a good movie. Still holds up. Back to our unicorns. By the mid-1600s, give or take, there was a belief that unicorn horn had this mystical and medical properties. Of course it does. And this substance that they would extract from the horn was called, of all things, alicorn. They were really original with some of their thoughts. But was later debunked by Danish physician Ole Worm, or Ole Worm. That was the name of the physician. I double-checked it. I cross-referenced. That was his name. O-L-E Worm. Anyway, the good doctor figured out that it was actually powdered narwhal horn, which is these beautiful creatures. I mean, they're a seagoing mammal with a horn. Like, that's not... There's nothing... They're majestic, but I wouldn't want to eat that horn. Just saying. Like, that looks gross. Narwhals are literally a horned whale. Some people call them tusked, but tusks usually come out of their mouth. This thing is like dunk right in the middle of their forehead. It's the unicorn of the ocean, if you want to call it that. They're body-wise, they're a beautiful animal, but their horn is disgusting. I could not imagine eating that. It just gross. Anywho, many of the tapestries that were commissioned around this time period, late 1400s to mid 1600s, 1700s, somewhere in there, were commissioned, and a lot more common images of unicorns were starting to pop up in these commissioned works. So people were actually wanting unicorns in their art around their house and castle. The two most popular ones, and a lot of the art you see referencing unicorns, And again, I could only find museum pictures, so we're skipping that. But I'll tell you the titles of the groups. The first one is The Hunt of the Unicorn. It's a series of 7 tapestries showing the hunt, the pursual, the eventual capture of the unicorn. There's a huge process, and they're very elaborate tapestries. They're worth looking up. It's The Hunt of the Unicorn. And the other one is The Lady with the Unicorn, and it's a series of 6 tapestries. They're good. Don't get me wrong. They're elaborate tapestries no matter how you look at it. The Hunt of the Unicorn to me is a little bit cooler. Just my artistic nerd coming out there. But they're both worth checking out just to see how the unicorns had changed from these horrific looking beasts from 2000 BC to now we're making them genteel and delicate and pretty much pure white with much shorter horn versus that 3-foot monstrosity. Now they're like 18, 20 inches. They're more proportional sized. Oddly enough, of course, you knew something like this was coming. The Council of Trent, the Catholic Church had some really crazy councils over the years, banned the imagery of the unicorn across the board, claiming that it was an elaborate depiction of a fictional creature. So they say. I don't believe that for a minute, because the ancient histories described eating it and talking about it being disgusting, talking about the smell, the texture, the size. They may have just decided, because the people on this council had never seen one. Well, it must not exist because it doesn't exist here in Italy or Rome or Britain. Cool story, bro. In Scotland, the unicorn, though, interestingly enough, became the symbol of their country. They believed that the unicorn was the natural enemy of the lion, and Britain's symbolized by a lion. So, of course, 2 warring countries, they want to have their animal of choice be the defeater of the other animal. So in the heraldry of Scotland, their knights, their lordships, and all of that, unicorns play a very important roles in their coats of arms, their flags, all of that. Unicorns are huge in their art. Many lands have their own coat of arms, their own tapestries that are specific to their area, with very, very centrally displayed unicorns saying, "This is ours, stay out." And it was also kind of a gigantic, "You can't beat us, Britain," to the British at the time. Interestingly enough, the unicorn in older translations of the Bible was still used. It was not referenced as the rhinoceros, that's a separate animal. It was actually referenced as a unicorn. Over time, and I'm not sure other than the ancient descriptions of this creature, they switched it to the term wild ox, which, if you go back to some of the older descriptions of this monstrous beast, I could see where they got close to that, but that's not the same animal by a long shot. It was associated during this time allegorically to the untamable nature and great strength, possibly evil, but it's not something you can tame. It's a wild force to be afraid of, basically, is how it was portrayed. Moving forward into our more modern era, unicorns literally have become everywhere. Like, you really can't look anywhere and not see something unicorn-based, especially in our modern culture. Some of my earliest memories, this is going to date me a little bit, is the old Lisa Frank. Now, this was stuff that we saw when I was in grade school, and everyone wanted, boys and girls both, wanted the Lisa Frank binders, the pencil carriers. You'll have to look those up, youngins, because that was a thing. Now you'd be like phone cases. But it was this style of unicorn. The very flamboyant, very rainbow-esque. But this is Lisa Frank work right here. She was I don't know if it was a single person, but the company really had a flair for the vibrant, the colorful, the very much rainbow artistic style. It was very bold, and that was something from grade school, like 3rd through 8th grade for me. I just remember that being so popular. All the cool kids had it. And over time, because of this rainbowed creature above my shoulder here, it has found its way into the LGB community, as well as creatures that are outside of the norm associated with rainbows and having mystic or unusual powers. Okay. But unicorns don't just go to random art from when I was a kid. They show up in the Harry Potter series as well. I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was only in the first book, the Sorcerer's Stone, and movie they talk about unicorns. It could have shown up after that. That's the one that comes to mind when I think about it. And another interesting series, I read a lot. There is an author by the name of Terry Brooks. You might know him from the Shannara Chronicles, which are awesome, but he has a little almost forgotten series. He's got a couple of other series, but there's one in particular called the Landover Magical Kingdom, or Magical Kingdom of Landover. I'm not sure, but it's the Landover series. And in the second book, and this was the first book I read, so I read them completely out of order, which is, again, kind of typical for me. But the book caught my attention because it had a green woman on the cover chasing a black unicorn. I was intrigued, so I bought it and I read it. And then I found out it was the second book, and I was annoyed. But the second book in the series is called The Black Unicorn. He has an interesting twist on the unicorns in this book, and it's interesting to read if you want to look at some alternative thoughts about it. The whole series, it's like 5-6 books long. I think it's 6. I think they just published as 6 a couple years ago. I put the first 3 books in the description below if you're interested. To understand a lot of the concepts in the Black Unicorn in the second book, you kind of need to read the first one, which is Magic Kingdom for Sale. They're fun. Like I said, they're just really fun, lighthearted books. They're quick reads. They're like 280 pages. The way he writes, and I love Terry for this, you'll kill the book in a day or two. I mean, even if you're a slow reader, the story is so engrossing, and the way he describes it is so much fun. Just something to think about. In the mystic or magical world, unicorns move between dimensions, times, and spaces. The veil doesn't mean anything to them. They step through it. They are preternaturally fast, supernaturally fast if you'd rather, and you can never catch one by chasing it. This is a common theme even back 2000 BC. So for 4,000 years, their speed is something that sets them aside. And when you look at the descriptions of the old ones and how bulky and how horrifying that might have been, the fact that they can move that fast is a little intimidating. You catch them by the virginal means. You have to be innocent. You have to be in a state of purity, and you have to not chase. You welcome it to you. And once it comes up to you, don't touch it. Don't reach out your hand. Don't do anything. The legends and the lore all stay the same thing. Wait till the unicorn bows his head to you, and then you can touch the horn. And the healing will be instantaneous. It doesn't matter what's wrong with your body, it's going to fix it. And good luck will follow the rest of your days, period. If you touch that horn or touch that animal without him bowing to you, or her, the results will be instantaneous bad luck and ill fortune for the rest of time, and you will never see another unicorn or magical creature again. They're kind of a gatekeeper in that respect. They will literally block your vision. You'll never see another one. No fairies, no dragons, nothing. That's the lore. And unicorns, interestingly enough, tying it to that, have the ability when called upon to grant wishes. Not just healing, but wishes. Again, there's some catches with this. They can guide you in your dreams because they literally pass through all veils. There's nothing that stops them. When you're going to sleep, set your intention to be guided by a unicorn in the dream state. This may take time because a unicorn is going to look at the purity of your intentions and the sincerity of your heart, and then they will make the decision whether they will contact you. You really don't have a lot of say in this. You have work to improve your chances, but you don't have a say. Your intention has to be pure. If not, they will ignore you. That doesn't mean you can't eventually get their attention, but they're really sticklers to this purity of thought, purity of intention, and sincerity of heart. So we'll get into how to work with that in just a second. Sorry, I've got all sorts of things going on here. The unicorn in the mystical is virtually immortal. Their lifespans are measured in thousands of years. So the same unicorn can literally follow a family for, several generations, and they think that this thing is immortal. No, it's just that long-lived. They live in forests and appear in the meadows within the forests. They will not go into cities. As with most magical creatures, and I mean most as in all, they don't like concrete and they hate iron. They don't like steel. They don't like not being connected to earth. Dragons are kind of an exception because they fly, so it makes it a little bit different for them. But these guys don't, and they do not like concrete everywhere. They want to touch dirt. Can't blame them, really. Their power lies in nature. All elements fall under the control and the sway of a unicorn. They can help you find your inner child. They can help you work with the elements, all 4 of them, 5 if you count ether. And they have amazing healing powers. That's the one thing that's consistent with a lot of the lore, even without cutting them up and grinding horns into powder and all that nonsense. Their presence is healing. And that's pretty common through the stories, even going back to the 2,000-year ones. There's little glimpses that they were used as helpers for healers. Something to think about. So they can come in to help now if you connect with them, if you're working with healing energy, like Reiki, energy work, aura readings, even tarot. But they also have an element of helping surgeons as well, like the mainstream medical. Even if you don't want to, you don't want to have a big poster of a unicorn in your place, even having just a little statue stuck in the corner somewhere where it's there is enough to connect you into that spirit. So it's something to think about if you're a healer, just throwing some more tools to you. They also have a unique ability, and a lot of magical creatures have this, but unicorns are very, very pronounced with it. They're very bold with it. And that is, they have the ability to see good and evil cleanly. There's no such thing for gray with the unicorn. It's good or it's bad. Simple. I like that belief. They respond to purity. Purity will draw them like a moth to a flame. If your intentions are pure and seeking growth, they will help you even if you're not fully purified yet. They will be there to support you because you're heading in the right direction. And you may not be able to see them because you have to reach a certain level of purity for that to happen, but you'll notice their presence will be there. Never try to deceive a unicorn. Don't. The results will not be in your favor, and it will end up being a lifelong problem. It's not like unicorns don't hold a grudge or something. But, you live for thousands of years. Holding a grudge for 50 years of a human's life is not that big of a deal. So, to call upon a unicorn, it's advised first find your inner child. You can have the unicorn energy help you find that child, but that's the primary focus, is find your inner child. We'll speed the process up. Find your inner innocence. That part of you when you were 5 or 6, playing outside, and that stick was a sword, that rock was a bomb, things like that. Your innocence of that time, where you still saw magic in the butterfly, where the seed sprouting out of the soil just completely enamored you. That chick hatching out of the egg was a miracle. It is a miracle, but that age, it's such an eye-opening event. It's so powerful in its innocence. That's the energy you need to access this realm. call in as much light as you can, then call in more. Make it so that you are literally glowing in the astral sense. You can actually feel yourself start to almost vibrate when you really get into this mode. Oddly enough, it's similar to some of the CE5 protocols with Stephen Greer's work. Funny how that kind of crosses over. Anyway, it's best, especially your first attempt at this, to be in a natural setting. Be outside, somewhere where it's quiet, alone. You can have some privacy where you can be there for a couple of hours if necessary and not be disturbed. Because if you're looking for a physical vision, this is kind of how it works. If you're just looking for something like an astral connection, like meeting him on the spirit plane, which is just as viable in my opinion, it's best to have living things around you. Have a houseplant. Not cut flowers. Those are dying the minute you cut them. You want a live houseplant. Or crystals. Crystals are great because they have that positive energy, then they glow in that purified state. So things like that to start with. You're going to calm your mind. Just bring your energy down, settle down, release the stress of the day. You don't need it anyway. It's actually good to do that a couple times in the day. Is just take a second, breathe, and kick it out. Then meditate on purity, on light, on the essence of love. Use the Om sound, what Shiva spoke the universe into existence with. Tap into that grounding, healing, light-based energy. Then, once you feel yourself glowing, practically vibrating with this higher frequency, this purity, and you feel that childlike innocence, that like urge to giggle over nothing, set the intention and put out that invitation to the clan of the unicorn. Again, don't be disappointed if you don't have some kind of a visit on the first try. They're going to evaluate you. They might be watching you long before you even get to this point just to see if you're going to go through with it, really. But they're going to decide on their own. They're very, very sentient beings. They're very, very intelligent beings. And they're going to evaluate, A, why you're calling, and B, what your intentions are. Those are the two primaries. If you're just doing it for fun, they might appear, they might not. If you have some kind of deceitful intention, they're not going to show up at all. They're not going to. And this is why you want to... Sorry. This is why you really want to tap into that inner child and bring in that beautiful white vibration of light. Bring that divine sound, the Om sound, forward before you make the call. That way you're in the highest alignment you can be in that moment. And even if you don't get into contact in that moment, be aware of your surroundings for several days after. They can have some other ways of catching you and showing up for you. Watch your dreams. You may come to a lucid dreaming point and have this really elaborate, very, very powerful interaction with them in the dream state, and when you wake up, you'll still feel that connection. They can show up that way. The other way is always treat them with respect, especially when you greet new creatures, because they've not always been treated in the most respectful way. I mean, the Greeks talked about eating them, so it's not always been the greatest thing. Because of what they are in the mystical sense, you always want to treat these creatures because A, they're virtually immortal for us, they're exceptionally powerful, and they have so much to teach that you treat them with respect. You don't have to worship them. They're not looking for that. But they want you to be respectful to them in the fact that they do know more than us in a lot of ways, which is pretty cool, and they're willing to share that information, that knowledge, and that power with us. So treat that interactions that you get with respect, just saying. Also pay attention to signs and symbols, like if all of a sudden you're starting to really notice white hair around your house and you don't own a white animal, or if you're noticing like you smell horses around you and you're in the middle of an office, little things like that will be indications that the unicorns are approaching. They're trying to let you know that they are around, but they're something that you might need to work on, some purity, maybe clean out some untruths at some point in your life, but they're around. And once you start to reach out to them, you'll notice that it becomes easier to make that contact. Over time, you might even be able to get a patron animal, like an animal guide that's unicorn, which would be awesome. But those are things for like meditation work and mystical practices and such. But even if you're just interested and you don't really understand all of that yet, they can be pretty powerful teachers as well. So, with that, we're coming to the end of the main discussion, and we'll show you. Well, we'll do that in a second. Anyway, so what do you think? What are your thoughts? Do you think that they were real at one point? Do they still might be real? Or are they just imagined creatures that over time have become part of our culture? Just part of what we think about. I mean, I've noticed personally, especially in the last 4 years or so, that they have become exceptionally big in a lot of different... Sorry, I'm just moving things around here. In a lot of different cultural ways. When I was growing up, they were everywhere. I mean, Lisa Frank brought them really big into attention. The movie The Last Unicorn was huge at the time when I was little, back in the 80s. We won't talk about how many years ago that was, but back in the 80s. And they kind of disappeared for a moment, and it might have been just the fact that my magic, my innocence was being lost. But I've also noticed that here in the last 5 years or so, they're starting to pop back up again. A lot more people are paying attention to them. You're seeing them in a lot more symbology. A lot of what you're seeing here recently has been with the LGBT community because, rainbow unicorns are flippin' awesome. Anyway, but things like that, they're starting to pop up again. So it could be just that they're re-emerging into the collective conscience. Maybe there's something shifting where we're coming into more alignment, where they might be willing to come back, which I'm not sorry to say. I would be very excited if some of these creatures from history showed back up. Or was it a real live creature that just happened to click the extinction button, which would stink really bad. Anyway, now comes I can't quite decide where I want to sit. The ending of the myth and tarot is the tarot part, where I will read a simple Celtic cross spread for the unicorns and see where the energy is for these particular mythical beings. And if you're new to the tarot, I read intuitively, so these are just the images that come through to me as I'm reading. I only read upright, and if you're interested in the deck that I'm using, it's linked in the description below. And with this deck, it's a twist on the Rider-Waite deck. So there are parts where I may have to hold a finger over certain areas because they're done in a Renaissance style, so they're very flowing, very voluptuous at points, and so not everything is YouTube approved. Speaking of, right off the bat, the unicorn's significator. This represents them in this present time for this reading. It is, oddly enough, the Temperance card, and she's not wearing a top, so we'll do it this way. Temperance is justice. It's balance. It's finding that flow. There was a temperance time where they were trying to make everyone stop drinking alcohol. But you're finding balance. You're reconnecting. Being temperate is you're not one, you're not the other, you're in the middle. And that kind of applies to the energy of a unicorn anyway, because even though their purity is really unquestioned, their history shows them to be a little bit more rough and tumble. But as things grow and mature, you grow up, you mature, you stop being quite as rough and tumble because you realize there's not always a need for that. But it's this search for purity, it's this search for balance that's coming up with the unicorns. So maybe they're in the process of seeking a new way to step into this crazy, chaotic world we live in today. So the thing that's their immediate challenge, or that which crosses, is the Seven of Pentacles. there's this flippant attitude that's coming forward, and it's almost a materialistic attitude that is working against them. It's not their attitude, it's the world we live in. We're so focused on technology. We're so focused on the next thing. We're so focused on not taking time. In today's culture, the concept of innocence is usually lost by age 8. That's a real significant reduction in years, because it used to be you'd remain innocent until marriage, which, depending on the culture and the decade or century, it was between 16 and 22. But now you're starting to see that loss of innocence in younger and younger generations, and that's where this materialism's coming in. It's this Seven of Pentacles, flippant. If it's not an electronic device, I'm not interested. I don't go out in nature. Like, ew, none of that. But there's a little bit of a pure balance, because 7's the perfected number. So even with that, there is this underlying belief, even though this is something that's working against the unicorns, there's an underlying energy with this that's saying, even though you're in this materialistic world, there's this hunger underneath for this fulfillment, which actually kind of works in the unicorn's favor. So what's crossing them is people are putting the illusion up that, oh, we have all this technology, we've got all this, we don't need you. But underneath it all, they really actually do want that connection to the mystic. They want the connection to the mystery. They want that reconnection with nature. But we're in this flippant, materialistic world where, ew, gross dirt, no. And that's the kind of energy that's working against them in this moment. So it's crossing them. So their higher consciousness, or their what's above them, the guiding energy, is the 8 of Swords. So their energy they're guiding with is actually kind of a traumatic energy, but it's an eternal energy. It's not just a simple, oh, it's coming in right now and that's all it is. It's this frustrating, like, why don't people understand? It's the eternal question. Why are they doing this? Why don't they understand that, magic is part of life, that how we treat each other influences how they treat us? It's this constant cycle of energy, but their higher influence is that eternal question, that eternal, but why? They want to cut away the illusion. They want to come to understand, swords are with air, so you've got this seeking of truth, but the truth is frustrating because it's just another illusion when you're dealing with the humanity especially. So it's kind of like even their higher energy, their higher influences are frustrated with the situation, is what's coming through. So let's look at their subconscious belief. It is the 5 of Pentacles. Subconsciously, they're frustrated. Have to edit. They're subconsciously, they're upset. Subconsciously, it's almost like, why do we try? Why do we want to help these creatures? Why do we want to interact with the human world? We're in the higher dimensions. Let's just stay here. They're kind of almost depressed. Their subconscious is coming across as kind of depressed, a little bit frustrated. They're not showing a lot of prosperity. There's a little bit of hope. I mean, there's the daffodil in the bottom, so you've got a little bit of hope that there could be something better, but it's just so much effort, and that's their subconscious energy. So their immediate past, which for them we'll call it the last 500 years, was the Sun. So this is major arcana. These are huge life lessons. This is big energy. And the Sun tends towards the masculine as well in the tarot and in metaphysics. But it's supported by the moon. So you've got this balance of masculine energy and the lunar queen, the goddess of the moon down below. You're building this supportive energy. The past for them has been very male dominated. It's been very, very strong projective masculine energy where they were interacting with humans. They were trying to be a little bit more like, we're here, see us. The the lunar energy in their past is saying it's okay to hide. So when they realized they couldn't get through, they stepped back. But they still have this more dominant energy where they want to be accepted. And this is their past energy. But the Sun is also saying in their past there was a lot more acceptance. There was a lot more vibrance. People were paying attention to them. They were being seen in the daylight type of a thing. but it's also a positive energy. So they weren't always seen in negative lights. It's been, as things have changed, they've kind of been driven out, but they're still there. So you could see it as they were here in the daylight sun, hanging out in light, but now they're hiding out in shadow, the moonlight, which is, kind of what happened. They kind of sunk into obscurity. And their immediate future is the Two of Chalices. This is a couples card. This is a relationship card. So their immediate future is showing positive turns. This is that connecting on a deeper level. In mainstream tarot, if you're reading it for non-metaphysical creatures, it means a connection with someone soul to soul, heart to heart. It's not just a friendship, it's much deeper than that. And so what this is meaning is the unicorns are starting to align with people who are in the right mindset. They are making connections. It's this spiritual connection that's coming through. So their immediate future, the next 500 years we'll go with, is a reconnection with the people in the human world who are willing to listen, who are willing to purify, who are willing to work to help benefit other people and build this light frequency, these light codes, as they're being referenced a lot, into these higher realms. So you've got a very strong, positive future coming forward for the unicorns. So let's look at the attitude. So this is the attitude affecting the unicorns in the moment. It's the Knave of Wands. Ooh, we got some arrogance coming forward in this one. And that could be a fall for them. This arrogant, I'm still better than you guys. This attitude of superiority, which, don't get me wrong, their energy frequency is better than humans. It's a lot higher. But it doesn't mean that they're better in the fact that we have to struggle to get to a point where they can connect with us. They don't have that struggle. They're already up there. And so their arrogance is almost misplaced. They haven't lived a life like we have. Their lives are in centuries, ours are in decades. There's a lot there that they are gloating about, and what I'm hearing is they shouldn't be. But that's kind of a bad habit of theirs over the years. They've gotten arrogant because they've had to for a survival thing, but it's not helping them in the now. The environment surrounding them, the environment is number 12, the Hanged Man. Their environment is changing. It's time to look at things from a different perspective. Their attitude is not serving them, is what I'm hearing. The Hanged Man is a symbol of change. This is a major arcana card, therefore there is a great deal of life lesson associated. It's seeing things from a different perspective. For us to see them, we have to shift into a higher frequency. For them to interact with us, they have to step into a lower frequency. Doesn't mean they're leaving their own, but it's opening the doorway, basically. But it's also their environment, they're shifting. There's changes happening. What they thought was a stable world where we can just live over here and ignore the humans isn't so stable anymore. As energy shifts and energy moves around, their world and our world are coming back into contact again. So they're having to see things from a different environment, a different way, because the Hanged Man is saying, your world is being tipped up on its head. Now look at it. The hopes and fears of the Unicorn Clan. Good grief, they had a lot of editing I had to do in this one. The Queen of Pentacles. We're working with earth energy again. We'll switch hands here. And she's gazing at her coin. She's gazing at her riches. And the unicorns are gazing at theirs. Their fear is, what if we reconnect with humanity and we lose everything again? But their hope is, what if we reconnect and it actually uplifts us all? Like, what if this becomes a positive connection? So their biggest fear is, we don't want to go through this being chased out of the world again. But their hope is that if everything works out, we can reconnect. We can bring the realms of their realm back into ours, where we can have some gateways where we can communicate again, which would be awesome, personally. The overall outcome, so this is summing this all up, is the number 1 of Swords. And this is kind of a dark image, but it's not really in this respect, because you have the sword, the search for truth, the seeking of a new path for truth, coming over the top. So it's chasing away the darkness. It's chasing away the shadows. It's chasing away the ignorance. So you've got this new journey that they're coming on. The outcome of all of this is they have a new journey. They have a new outlook that is coming forward. There's something that they have to do. They're starting. They're just beginning. It's the one, the ace. And that means it's truthful time. It's the search for genuine truth, not our truth. And when you start to go towards that truth, the shadows have to leave. Truth illuminates. Lies hide, shade. The sword is coming loose from its tears. It's been wrapped up. This truth has been hidden. It's cutting through because it has to chase the shadows back into the darkness. So overall, what's coming out of this is truth will prevail. It just has to find its way out of the darkness as well and free itself from the trap of illusion. So hopefully that was at least entertaining for you guys, giving you a little idea of how I read the tarot as well. The unicorns sound like things might be turning up for them. They have to overcome some of their own emotional issues to get to a point where they'll connect in with the rest of us, but it looks like it's possible. So with that, we'll bring this to a close. If you enjoyed this stream, please drop a like on the video. If you're watching on replay, again, please drop a like. Comment, let me know what you think. Answer any of the questions that I've posed in this as well. Just kind of see what people's thoughts are on the subject. It's a unique subject, to say the least. And share. If you're interested and you think someone else might like this as well, share. Let them know. With the comments, even if they're even if it's criticism, please just let it be respectful. I think we can all be a little bit more respectful in life. I know I try to be, doesn't always work. So we're all human, I guess I should say. But with that, I will let you guys go. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. And I will talk to you in a future stream or video.